Okay, so over the past week, I've been making a pen, and they're really cool, and now I'm going to go over how I did it by going through these files here and explaining how I made each one and what they are. So I'm going to start off with this file here because that's the first thing I made. So what I did was I created these two gears because these are not ordinary sunglasses. They are magic shades. And the way I made these two gears was simply by creating these two discs. This one is, I believe, okay, this one is 20 millimeters wide and this one is 50. 20 millimeters and 50. Then I put them in this assembly, used the design tab to generate a spur gear with a gear ratio of 2.5. I also made the small one have 24 teeth, which made this big one have 60 teeth, which is a multiple of 4, which I really wanted because I wanted it to have rotational symmetry. Then what I did was I created new parts based off of those gears. I'm going to suppress this real quick. By copy-pasting sketches from those gears, by copy-pasting sketches from those gears and just extruding them. And then in this small gear, I just put a hole because that's all I needed. It's more or less just a drive gear. Then in the other gear, this one had to be special because this gear is a lens for the sunglasses. And this is where the magic happens. I cut out this big, huge hole to put the lens in, and I put these what I like to call micro tabs in it in order to hold the lens in place. Then to hold the gear in an axle of some sort, I created this extrusion here of just a cylinder or just a circle coming out of it, and that is more or less the same as the hole in this one here. Well, not really. It's actually like the thing that goes in this hole. Next was the frames of the glasses. So first I will open up the outside side of the frames, which is currently clear, and this was a lot of work. So what I did was, first I took measurements of my face, and I created this sketch here based off of the measurements I took of my face. 164.2 degrees here. This is 10.5 millimeters, which might need to be shorter in future versions, but that's later. And I just extruded it to get just a simple, basic, regular old shape. Just like it's rectangular. Then I cut out this hole right here and this hole right here. And in these two extrusions here, I have these important dimensions right here. This is 2 millimeters, and this dimension right here. And the next thing I did was I opened up an assembly. Then what I did was I kept editing the frames, the part of the frames in the assembly, until I had these gears look like they were meshing. And what I edited in this part was the dimension here and the dimension here. These dimensions I edited until the gears started meshing, and then I was happy with that and I saved it. Then the next thing I did was I came back to the frames and I cut out more or less the shape of sunglasses, because at that point it was looking more or less just like this box here, but with a couple holes in it. So I cut cut out the shape of sunglasses, and then at that point I had a whole set of frames. So I added this part here to hold the earpieces, and then after that I created basically the outside and inside of my frames. So here's the inside, which, if you notice, has all the same extrusions up until a point as the outside of the frames. And the reason is, up until a point, they were literally only one part. And what I did was I split them up by creating this extrusion here, I believe. Yes. I made this sketch and extruded away everything but this part, and then on the other one I extruded away just this stuff. And that gave me two pieces that I could take apart and put back together, because I needed to do that. Oh, and also the outside of the frames has this little slot in there. That's because these are magic shades, and each lens needs two lenses. So this slot here holds a lens, and the gear holds another lens. And if I make the gear visible, you'll notice that the gear fits real nice into this hole here in the frame, which is of course by design. And the idea is, right, I would put one lens in this gear in these micro tabs, and I would put the other lens through this slot in here. The idea, of course, is that when you rotate these, the lens is made out of a polarizing filter, so when you rotate this, it changes the angle between this polarization and this polarization, causing you to be able to change how dark or bright the lens of the sunglasses are. This assembly doesn't have all of the parts, because I didn't need all of the parts, but it does have what's necessary to design the glasses. So as you would rotate this, which is how I designed it, is to rotate this middle gear here, that would obviously rotate this, and it would also rotate the other lens, which is not in the assembly, and they would both be rotating at the same rate, and they would change their angle relative to the other lenses, what I call the stationary lenses, and change the brightness. So that's how these sunglasses work. That's why they're called magic shades, because they change their brightness, and I will show that later because I have the whole thing built actually. So the next thing I did was I designed the earpieces, which is really not much to talk about. It's literally just some sticks and some pegs. What I did was I created this sketch, and of course I made it so that I could edit this however I wanted, and I could edit this like that, and I could edit this angle here, which I'll move back there, because the thing I did was I basically started off with one earpiece set and printed that and just wore it and to see if it would fit, and then I just kept on changing these dimensions here until it fit, and this is what fits me. So it's not that complicated. Save changes to earpiece, no. So now if I open up the assembly, I can make the earpiece visible. I couldn't create the earpiece until after I had already 3D printed the frames, but what I did was I printed the frames and I printed the earpiece, and I just kept putting it together until the earpiece fit nicely. Now this assembly here obviously has the earpieces weird, but that's because both of my earpieces are in one part, because it was way easier to just mirror it than to create a whole new part. And I could separate them the same way I separated the frames if I want, but I don't need to, so I'll just make those invisible because they're kind of ugly. So then what I did was I printed all of the parts and I put them together, and I just checked to see if they work, right? And for some reason, Inventor decided to be a weird little bitch to me and change the gears every time I did anything. I don't know why, but somehow it was changing the gears. I don't know what happened, but it just didn't work. So what I did was I forced this middle gear here by just making the spurs a little thicker, which is not by any means ideal, but worked, and later on, at some point, I might come back and fix this whole gear situation. But Inventor was being really mean about the gears, and I don't know why it never worked the way it was designed. But that's what happened. So I printed it out, and I put it together, and everything worked more or less as intended. And I held everything together with just this. This is nothing special. It's just a little stick to hold the middle gear into the frames. I also created, this is a little, just like a little peg. I call it a sticker because it sticks onto the earpiece, because the tolerance is such that it sticks onto the earpiece kind of like a Lego, and it doesn't come off unless I actively force it to, and that'll hold it on. And this is the same thing, but to hold in the middle gear. And if you look closely, these gears here are held in by the fact that these are stuck together with like this same thing as before. So another thing I forgot to mention is, after I separated the frames into two pieces, I made like just these pegs to go into the holes in the other one. See, it's got a hole in it, so it just goes in there, and everything aligns really nicely to fit together because that's how I designed it. After I printed that, I fit all the pieces together to make sure that they worked and were moving as intended. Then, once I was satisfied with how everything was working, it was time to create the lenses. So what I did was I made this here, which is a stencil, and this stencil is for the stationary lens, and I made this here, which is another stencil for the gear lens. And the way this stencil works is, it's the same size as the polarizing filter that I bought on Amazon that I'm using for my sunglasses, and it is just a cutout of the shape that it needs to be in order to fit the shape of the lens that I designed into the glasses. And this one has, you know, little tabs, the little micro tabs that I designed, and this one is literally just a shape that fits into the hole. And the way I use these is, I have another piece that's literally just a solid plate to hold the filter in, and I drew on the filter with a marker to mark it out, and then I cut it out with just plain old scissors. So it really, that was really the easiest part of this, was this. Then I put everything together. I cut out the lenses, and I put everything together, and it functioned, and it worked, and it was really cool. So now I'll show you how I put it all together. Okay, so now I've got this thing right here with which I will cut out this polarized filter into the shape of the lens for the glasses. These glasses. So what I did with these filters is I took them outside, and I looked through them outside to see which orientation blocked the most reflection off of the ground, and then I marked it. See, it's hard to see, but I marked it with a little horizon, so that it looks like it's, so that I know which way it goes. So according to the model, or according to the glasses, this curve is at the top, right? So in order to block the reflected sunlight at the bottom, it just has to be oriented so that more or less it just has to be lined up like this, with the top with the top of the stencil at the top of the sun. So now I just put it in here, which it's too small. It's too small. I don't know why. That's not how I designed it. It's exactly... Okay, well, I put it in here, and I make sure that these corners are the corners that are not going to get fucked up. And then I put this part on it just to keep it straight. Except it's too damn small, so I don't know if I should, but I'm doing this anyways. So now that it's in there and flat, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Sharpie and I'm just going to trace the outline like 3 times. That way I can see it when I cut it. Let's see. Might be hard to tell, but I can see it in there. Right there is an outline. I'm also going to do the same thing with this one because there are 2 lenses in every pair of glasses, except this pair has 4. It's got 2 pairs of lenses. So again, I'm going to line this up to the top here and just put this on here. It doesn't have to be on to. It has to be like that. I'm going to do that because these little arrows are in the way. Now put this again, make sure it's flat, and trace it. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pop it out. Now I can see it. Now I can pop it out. And I can see it, and I can cut it. With just an ordinary pair of scissors. Scissors. No, no. I'm good. Now, make sure it's in the frame. I'm going to I'm going to cut outside of line because I'm scared of putting too far inside, but realistically inside line is probably better. This is the easy one. The hard one is going to be for the gear lenses, but it's not going to be hard. I practiced before on my lenses. So now, where did I put the glasses? Here they are. So now this should match up more or less like this, except on this side. And you could theoretically just slip it right in. Like that. Only trouble, of course, is that it's a little too big because I cut it a little bit too big. That's why I cut it. You can always cut more off, you can never put more back on. So, actually I'm wrong there. The real problem is that essentially I made the model in the wrong order, so the slot is being blocked by something that the slot is supposed to go through, but it doesn't. So, but what I actually ended up doing was just cutting it with a steak knife to make the slot bigger. It wasn't a big deal. Oh, you know what? I was being stupid, and I didn't realize that this is in the way. That's fine, I'll just cut through it with a knife. this side there's like a small little gap. Let's see. On this side there's like a small little gap, but the gear covers it. So now these kind of work as sunglasses, but not much. Because now, if I were to take this, and this is the effect I'm taking advantage of, is if I was to take this and rotate it, it would get darker. It's hard to tell from this thing. Okay, let me rotate the sunglasses actually. See? It gets darker. And that's... So I'm going to put another set of these in these gears. With these, it doesn't matter which way... It doesn't matter which way that little sun symbol goes, which is very hard to see on this one. Holy cow. Very faint sun symbol. Let me see if I can... Oh, see? Yeah, there's a little symbol there. That tells me which way... That told me which way to put these. But it doesn't matter since these are going to be rotating every which way anyways. So make sure that it's like that, flat, and twist it. Go away. Pop it out. And you can see the blue now. And I'm just going to cut along the blue. First, trace the other one. Also, I need to use these so I need to do orientation to use a similar match. It's very useful to like and fix it. On the way. And there it is. It's not hard to make out on that one side, but there it is. So on the left side, it's not just with the symbol. Now I'm just going to use the hard ones, because I have to use along the blue again. Make sure they fit inside the tiny little tab I made for the use. I can make it tab here, but I'm stupid. So now, I'm going to peel off just the tabs and cut them off from the protective plastic bit, because that way I can mess with them all I want without getting my fingerprints on them. Which again is not a big deal, I can just clean it, but... No, it's just not to. It's not to clean it. It's lazy. Then, how do you clean it? You don't clean it. It's a bitch. Yeah. 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I can just... Now I can just... Now I can just... Wait, did that get cut off? Okay, now I can just stick these in. Now it's hard to tell, but there are little tabs inside the gear. Can't see them, but they're in there. I'm just shove this inside there, and this one in there. And this one there, actually. So, just like on my other one, on my practice set, these are a little bit too big, the circles. So let me just cut the circles out a little more. But go on inside all the circles. This one side. So now if I just stick it back in, where's the, stick that in there, and that one's a bit weird. This one in here, where is it? There it is. Pop it up, and put it in there. That's good enough for me. They're going to be fairly close to my face, because they're going to be... It's going to be like that. And watch this. It gets darker. Yeah, hello. Outside this and inside this. And outside this. Outside the circle. So the other one inside the circle, outside that. Is that what looks? I should go to... Okay, now we're Scratch. Now again, I can lots of mistakes again. The other one, I can turn off. There's 3. There's 3. That's 4. 4 wants to stay on again. No, that. That's not that. That's what I'm doing. Alright. Oh, he's getting not. Oh, I see that. 6. 7. The tabs are so small, you need to just click their class button in. I like that way, I like that, so I don't want to really and number 8. We can see no fancy switch. Alright, now here. 3 and 4. The unlabeled side from this gear and put it in such that the gear is facing upwards and meshes with the other gear. Then I'm going to remove the unlabeled side from the other gear and do the same thing. And pull it up. And do the same here. Vertical line. And it must mesh. There. Now, when I turn this gear, these are moving at the same rate, and if you look carefully, the lenses are darkening. The lens is darkening. Now they should get brighter. And yeah. So now I put this side on. And so
magic glasses. Or magic shade. Now I take my earpieces, which these are the right ones, right? Yeah, they should be. Put them in the earpiece holes, which I have specially designed to be used, and now they're wearable. So now, if I turn it, sometimes it gets misaligned. And then turn it, and it works pretty well too.